Hi, my name is Ray Horner from rayhorner.com, and today we're going to work on a watercolor. And this is the watercolor. It has waterfalls in the background, and some rock formations, and I'll show you how I created this watercolor step by step, and hopefully you can follow along or do something similar. Hopefully this video will help you to move along in the process of working with the medium of watercolor. So in this drawing, I made a light drawing of the scene. It's like a mountain with a waterfall. So what I want to do first is just kind of lightly wash in. I'm using some ultramarine blue, and I'm just going to put in a light wash across the top for the sky. I'm using Arches paper, watercolor paper. So I'm just kind of like floating the color around here at the top here for the sky. Just a little dry brushing. Just plain water right here to get that light wash across the top. And then there's a lot of water, a lot of blue in here in the scene, so I'm going to bring some of that blue right down to the bottom, and then I'm going to switch over to a cobalt blue, and when this dries, the sky, this a little bit more of that wash in there. So in the beginning it's just sort of like a soft wash, kind of like a real soft wash here, and I'm going to tilt the board so that it'll float down better. Let the water run down the page. When I do the water going across, I'm going to turn the page in the opposite direction. You know, for this, just for the initial wash, kind of like the initial block-in wash. Just put in a little water, more water here, and more color over here. Run this water down all the way down to the edge. And then there's some darks right here on the side and over here on this side. But I'm going to let this dry first, and then I'm going to come back in with a little bit darker blue. In fact, right now, I guess I could just put in one layer of blue here as an underpainting for the rocks that are coming in on the side here. So keeps it soft, keeps those edges soft, and then over here on this side here, just kind of like run some of this in here. And along the side here, the waterfall, there were some areas where the water was just kind of running down on the side of contrast. So kind of lay that in. I'm using the side of my brush so I can get the texture of the paper to show through. And that's maybe just a little bit of color over here. I just put a touch of red in it just to darken it a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna let this dry now. So what I'm doing now is just, sometimes when you're working, you have to go back in, and when you loosely put in a wash, you can go back in and reestablish the drawing. So like some of these rock formations in the background. So in the beginning, I kind of loosely lay stuff out, but now I can go back into it and bring things in just a little bit more in focus of where I want things to be placed. Like some of these, I don't know, like little islands that are out here. And so I just want to put those in so that I have a little bit of an idea where I want things to go. And there was a rock formation out here, and which is good, is that some of the blue will work as a nice underpainting, but also some of the whites that I want, I have to leave them there, because with watercolor, anything like light whites, you want to leave those whites, like the water splashing over here on the side. I'll leave that there. I'm not going to use masking fluid or anything like that, because sometimes those lines are a little bit too harsh. So I want the lines to be a little bit softer. Now, some people might not even do this drawing, but for those that, when you're just starting out, this might be the best way, just to go back in and reestablish. And I find that often you can go back, and this is kind of like the geometric forms and hard edge shapes on the rock forms, kind of really helps to bring those rock formations out. So bring that in, and that edge here. So now I sort of like reestablish this. What's going to happen in the background, I might work the background first and bring it forward, and I can just like really lightly bring in some of these areas in the back here. So I'm going to work some of these little mountains that are like really light in the background, and what I did was I added the blue with a little bit of burnt umber and a little bit of alizarin, to make a light wash towards the background. So to keep it gray, I used the umber just to kind of gray out the color a little bit. So here in the background here, I had this color. So just so that when I start watercoloring the water, I just put in some of the patterns of the waves in here, kind of lightly, so that when I start painting freely, kind of really freely, I have some kind of a direction. So I have these little lines here just showing where the waves are, and some of where the lights are, the lighter areas would be. So when I splash the water in here, it'll help it. So I'm going to bring in some of the background colors back here. Just going to bring it in lightly so that this will just kind of give you an idea of what some of my direction is going to be. So just kind of like lightly drawing the background in. And here. And I'll go back into it again. And over here, some of the waterfall stuff that starts to happen. I just kind of like let it run down, trying to like almost try to feel it so that you could get that effect. And kind of scumble over here a little bit. And a little bit more tone in here. A little bit color here. So this is just made up with a little bit of the ultramarine blue, a little bit of the brown. I used a little bit of that burnt umber and some alizarin just to kind of make this color. And then I'll put some more tone in here. Now this kind of gives me an idea of my light source, what my light source is going to be like. Let me do the same thing over here on the rocks. It's not as dark as it's going to be, but at least it gives me an idea of the direction of the light. And right now, kind of getting close to what I would want to do with the color, but not quite yet. So this kind of gives me a little bit of that idea. So I'm going to go into the background again with a little bit different. Some blues in here. I'm going to use a little bit of the cobalt blue, and then I might just add a little bit of green to it by using yellow. Okay, well, I found that I think I'm going to use a little bit of cerulean blue instead. A little water, just water by itself, and then just kind of like blend it out. And then a little bit more blue, just intensify it a little bit. This will bring out the clouds in that area. And then right down near the base here. And I'll go over here and bring in some of that cerulean blue too, in combination with that ultramarine. I'm sort of like using the side of my brush. And I can scumble a little bit with the brush along the edge here. And this maybe a little blue here. Just make the sky, give it a little drama in the sky. Now I'm just going to bring in some water and just kind of let it blend out on the edges here. And bring in some more of that blue into the side of the mountain. Keeps it atmosphere in the background, keeps everything kind of going, moving in the back. Maybe a little bit more blue. Just drop it on like that. Water. Let the water do the work. And a little bit of, maybe a little bit of blue back here. So these mountains in the background, keep them kind of like in the blues. Extra here, and then over on the side a little bit more intensity of blue here. I'm going to make this a little bit darker. And over here a little more blue. And this is the area that's going to be dark, much darker later, but I need some of that blue. I think ahead, think about the blues that'll be used in here. So the next thing I'll do is I'm going to start working the, I don't like to overwork the sky. It's enough in the sky just to kind of indicate the sky, some of the things that are going on in the sky. So now I'm going to start working the water, and I may like to work across, so I'm going to work across, and I did a little drawing in there so I can work that. So I'm going to continue with the cerulean blue, and I'm going to work into the water. And I'm just going to, this is going to take several layers, so I'm going to start working across the water. And the cerulean, because it's a little bit lighter blue, so I'm just kind of like, I'm going to let the water kind of like let this paint. So this is kind of wet, really wet. And I mixed up enough pigment in my tray. Hopefully I'll be able to get through this whole thing to the bottom. I want to leave enough of the lighter values in here that I already established from the beginning. So just kind of like run this across and just kind of like, I don't know, I call it like dancing around the brush. Kind of like flipping, lifting and dropping water. One thing about this, it's kind of like you move slow, it leaves a little more water, and go back in, move fast, you can leave a little less water. So I'm going to leave a little more water there, go back in here and just drop some water into it, a little more pigment into that water. And move over here. And sometimes what you don't do is just as important as what you don't paint. It's just as important. I see a lot of color in here, in the water. This is the area that you can really have fun with. So I'll go back in and put in some green, some purples, and give it some interest in that water. So, but right now I'm just working with one color. Just this one color. Just and kind of move and move up. So if I have a concave form, like the water is making this concave form, I move my brush up and then I swirl it around. Here. So these concave, a lot of waves, you know, they kind of concave movement. So I move my brush in the same way, in a concave way, to get that feeling. And just gonna dance around the tip of the brush here. And lay it down and lift it. Swirl this brush around here. Over here, like this. Just dropping some water in here, which is interesting because a lot of this stuff has to kind of let it happen. You see some of the darker passages over here that I'll go back into with some ultramarine. And this real quiet area down here, just kind of like let's lay in some color. I'm using the side of my brush. Just use the side of the brush so that I can get a kind of nice blend. And some more swirling effects over here for that water. Okay, so that's my first layer. I'm going to go back into it. Okay, so now I'm going to add another blue. Yeah, so like we have 3 different blues. So we used kind of like they call it ultramarine, but this is more of an ultramarine that I'm using here. I think the first one was cobalt blue, because they weren't titled. Yeah, this is more of an ultramarine. So I had to let them dry, the colors dry a little bit, and just add another color. So it's good to use more than one blue. Okay, so here a little bit darker passage over on the side behind the rocks. And then this is a really dark passage here on the side. I want to start getting that in. the edges. It's kind of brings out when you work the edges like this. It kind of helps to frame out the picture. Okay, so now I'm just gonna bring in some of that water, passages of the water here. Some more of the water. Just a little bit. There's areas, there are a little bit dark areas in places. And then over here, there was some darks, beginning to put in some of these darks. Some of these colors. And drop the brush down. And right through the waves here. And blot. Blot it up a little bit. Lay some color down here. Some of this color. And introduce a little bit of this blue onto the rock. Or it kind of integrates it a little bit by having a little bit of that color in there. And right by the water, just kind of like drop it down a little color. Yeah, I'll leave that light in the background. And then we'll go back into a little green, blue-green. So I'm just going to do something real quick. I'm just going to indicate where these little islands are. It's like little green, almost like little green blobs. So I'm just going to put these in out here in the space here with local color for now. Same thing back here. So we'll start out with a lighter color first. And same thing back here. And this is where that initial blue, putting that initial blue down was good. Keeps it back in space better. Leave some of that in there. Okay, so that, and then all the way kind of like towards the back, there was some greenery coming in here on the top. It was good that we had some of the blue there first. It kind of helps it to stay back in the background. Here, bring in some more. The green back there. And some peaks of the green. Those little trees in the background. Bring them in the background here. And little areas here in the back. And the next thing I want to do is bring in some blue-green here. So I'm going to shift greens. That was more of an earthy green. Now I'm going to switch over to Viridian. It's really Viridian with a blue cast to it. And let me just test it. Sometimes what I do is I just test some of the colors over here, see how dark they are. I don't want to make it too dark to start. So So in some of these passages here, especially close to where the islands are, I'm bringing some of that green. In the water. Not a whole lot, just a little bit of it. And bringing some in here. With that kind of like aqua. So now this is a little bit more of the blue-green. Yeah, this is much better. I like bring that in. It's like a blue-green. Pattern. It's always like think about, as I'm doing this, it's like think about the kind of patterns that are being made in the water. It's almost like painting abstractly. And keeps it from being too flat too. Keeps it from these colors here. So I'll put some green down. And then blot. Some cast shadows. Background. And then bring a little bit of that color into the background for the side of the mountain right here. Just a little bit in the background there. It's good to integrate similar things around the picture and some of these colors. And then this rock formation, this is kind of dark over here on the side. So I'm bringing some of that in. Drop the color on it, just like that. And then right here, by the water, a little bit like a really light wash in the waves, just to kind of give it a little bit more shape and modulation there. And yeah, the splashing of the water. Okay, so now we got all this stuff in. Now we can go back and do a little detail. So what I'm going to do now is just like quickly where some of the rock formations were, I'm going to blot, put water down, and just kind of blot them up. See if I can lighten them a little, some of those areas just a little bit. And some water down here, and maybe able to get some of it up. And over here, blues tend to stain more. The earth tones are really good for going back in and blotting things out. The good thing is that these colors are going to be darker. They're much darker. So, and then later on, what we're going to do is like a lot of the color in here. I'm going to wash some blue here so that they're not so pronounced, and only the areas that where I want some of the light, the shimmer of the water to show. So like some in here, little speckles. But most of this would be, the values would be close in value to each other. So I'll just kind of like wash them in, but I want to kind of like play around out here with some of those colors in the background. So I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow ochre in here. Give it a little earthiness to the yellows. Same thing over here, a little. That's with this painting, it needed something other than all of this blue, and this kind of yellow ochre kind of helps break it up a little bit. And then in the background, put a little bit of that yellow ochre back there in the background. Kind of just a little bit back there against the coolness, because so much cool, so everything is so very cool. So just a little bit of this warmth here by using a little bit of this yellow ochre in here with the greens. And we'll go back in and put some more green in, a little bit more greens in there. So I'll let that dry, and maybe just a little yellow ochre in here. I'm going to go over this. This will just be for underpainting. And over here. So to make it a little bit for the rock formation, what I'm going to do is, it's better to mix these colors like a gray, because when they break up, when they dry, they kind of separate, and sometimes they can create some nice interesting effects. So I'm going to make a gray by making purple first, but I'm going to use a alizarin and ultramarine blue, and then I add a little bit of the burnt umber to it, and it makes for a nice looking gray color. So I'm going to see, like it's like a gray, but when it dries, we'll make it a little bit lighter. I'm going to probably do a little blotting in it. So we had that underpainting underneath, so that gives it a little bit of interest. A little blotting on the rocks. And we do the same thing over here. Rock formation. More darker. Right by the island here. Play around here and just kind of, I know I use that term, play around. That kind of bled in. That's good, that's good. blot these back a little bit so they're in the background, so I don't want them to be as pronounced. Oh, blot my old friend. Paper towel, napkin, tissue. These colors that are in the background. There was like little islands or something out here in the background. And then with some rock formations here. I don't want these to look flat, so even though they're dark, sometimes things are dark, but you still kind of like want to treat them as if you could see what's going on in that dark passage. So you don't want to just lay it down. I mean, you could get away with it, but it's better when you kind of like still think about the shape and form. So to still put some of those colors in. Around this rock formation down here at the bottom. And this dark rock down here in the foreground. I mix some burnt umber, blue together to make my dark. And I'm going to go back in to some of the areas that around these rock formations that need a little bit of the side of the plane of the rocks. So they're darks, but they still have that translucent look of watercolor. So they're not darks that have that are opaque. They still are translucent, so they still have that watercolor feel to it. So here, so I'm going with a little bit more detail. Lay that in and maybe blot some of these areas out, so I don't want them to. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. This is more of a rock formation, so this dark side of the rock formation. We'll put that in. So I get that, maybe a little area back here in the back. And then I'm just kind of blot it a little bit. Just so it won't be so even all around. Now I can go back in the background here and give these a little bit more detail and do the shadows that cast on the water. Same thing over here, and kind of work with the negative spaces to bring out the trees in the background. Here. And here too. I'm going to do more detail in the background here with the trees, so just by working the negative spaces around the tree to help bring that out a little bit. And Same with these back here. So some work the negative spaces around the trees. And just kind of leave these alone. Key sometimes with watercolors is like not to go too crazy with it. It's simple. Keep it kind of simple. And then over here on this side, I want to darken this area a little bit more. There's a rock formation over on the side. And there's some more blue. So I'm going to really go really deep with this blue. Before it dries, I'm just going to blot a little bit to soften the edges. A little more blue. I like the blue because it uses some color. It's not just dark, but it also gives it some nice color around those edges. And let's see. Move over here on this side and bring in some more, just in some areas, a little bit more of the darks. It's kind of like they say, dance around the brush a little bit. And then these waterfalls over here on this side here. So right now I'm just kind of like putting some water in here. I'm going to go back into it. So get to wet the surface a little. And then we'll float some color into it. Just kind of let it run down. Almost like the same way that the waterfall would run down. So we just kind of like let it run. I'm tilting the paper a little. Let it run. I often forget that this, with this watercolor, you can just kind of let the watercolor work for you. Maybe do a little. Yeah, that's better. I'm just going to run some straight water. Maybe I can get this to bloom a little. We'll see what happens when it dries. So in here I just add a little bit of red, not red with the blue, just to kind of give it some more color. With some warmth in there, kind of helps to bring it out. And add a little green to this mixture too. Over here. And do the same thing with this one. With some alizarin with the gray. Maybe just add a little alizarin in there by itself. Yeah, that's it. Maybe a little alizarin over here. This is with watercolors. It's like a really light wash. A little alizarin on those areas. And a little down here in this rock down the formation down the bottom. So sometimes when I'm working with rocks, I may spritz it with the toothbrush, but I'm just gonna like use the tip of my brush just to bring in a few little speckles on the rock, and also almost like cross hatching or stippling around this area here. Kind of helps to bring out the detail. So I know it's not something that people normally do with the watercolor, but it can give you a nice texture on the rock. So I'm just gonna like move around on the rock a little bit. Over here, this one's more or less in the background a little more, but it still needs a little bit more contrast. To the lower section of the rock. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. And just kind of like stippling around a little bit. Because I don't want everything to be one solid black or one solid dark. Kind of want it to have a little variations in the tone. So I'm kind of like move around a little bit. This side here, this side plane. If I get a strong plane, then I can do that. The next thing to do is to go back into the trees just a little bit, just to bring a little detail in the trees. Well, before I do the trees, I'm just going to add a little bit more to the waterfall in the background, just light washes. My tissue before it gets too dark. Back here. Kind of have the water kind of trickling down. And again, just kind of like dabbling down the water. And then I'll go back in there and wipe some of it back. And that's it. I'm going to mix up some greens now. So I have 3 different greens here on my palette. So I'm going to start with the lighter green first and kind of lay that in there. There's too much color. Lighten up on the brush. So I was putting it in with a little pattern. It's kind of hard to see on the camera. And get some of this more earthy green. And bring some of that into the foreground. And under the tree. In the foreground here. Sometimes the darker colors need to be in the maybe towards you a little bit. Here. Values. On the side of the tree. The side of this one right here. So I need to let these dry, and then I can go back and it seems like it was just a couple of dabs here and there, but sometimes those little dabs bring stuff out a little bit. Let that dry and see how it dries. Sometimes when it dries, it may it may look better, or it may look lighter. It may need to be going over again. So I'm just going to go back into the greens a little more, and just to put in some details. Again, I put too much water on my brush. Wipe it a little bit, put the color down, wipe it. And then the last touch I'm going to do is the water. The water's too bright, so I'm just going to go back into the water again and put more blue into the water. Get rid of a lot of these white spots and even up some of these values in here. Put some color. I put a little purple in here to darken these areas down a little bit, and I'm just going to take a little bit of this light purple and just for color. A little color in here. And you can just lighten that up. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to mix up some blue. Maybe some cobalt blue, and mix it so that these waves aren't so pronounced, so that they're a little bit less pronounced, and so that I can show that little shimmer that's going through the water. So I have a much larger brush now. I'm just going to mop in. So you can still see the first layers where we put down the water before. Because as you put more layers down, now I want a little shimmer in here, so here I'll just kind of like bring this in. Let's see. And I'll leave that little shimmer in there coming through the water right in there. And then kind of even this out. Leave some of that blue in there, the green in there, and just kind of like get rid of some of the whites. So it won't be so bright. And then down here, just kind of get, yeah, this is better. And I'll leave a little shimmers, a couple of lights in the water, and the rest of it. Here, a light wash here, let some of that shimmer of the water show up over here on this side, and this blue, a little bit of light coming in off the back, this shimmer right there, and bring in some more. Yeah, help get rid of a lot of that color that was those whites in there. So now it's got a little shimmer here in the water, a little shimmer over here, a little purple in there, background. Lights. Yeah, I like this a little better. Now after bringing out, of taking and knocking down a lot of that, those bright whites that were in there all over the place. Now it looks a little bit more like water. So I'm going to bring in some of this aqua color that I made up. It's like green and blue combination. This is Viridian and Cobalt blue. Just bring in some of those waves, some of those details again. And they're close in value, so that they don't show up a lot, but it's enough to give it some interest. And then wash the color over it, kind of took away some of the little details in there. And bring in some of that water. Waves. Some more of those waves in. Okay, so this is where the light shimmering off the water. We'll leave that in. This little white in here. And here's a little bit of the clean up the edge of the rock. Let's just say that it looks like I'm painting around the rock, but I'm also helping to bring out the rock. So I'll bring this in. Water here. Lay my brush down and just kind of let it do its work for me. And kind of like going down a little bit. Looks like it's going downhill a little bit. And I think one more pass with the green. And I'll probably do some more of the blue in there too. So you never really, it seems like you had enough. You can't just either do it real simple or go in and spend the time in there with the water and put more of the water in there. A little shadow under by the rock. Reflection. Same here. A little bit more around the sides of the rock. I'll let this dry, and then I'm going to probably go back in with a little bit more of the blue. I put a little reflection over here under the water, and this is cerulean blue, and I add a little black to it just to knock down some of the edge off of it. And then I'm going to go in here with some straight cerulean blue. And the waves. Let's do it lighter. Water in the mix. Leave some of the light passing through here. This little bit of light that's kind of like seems to be moving through. So I want to leave that in there. Still see some of the water. And leave that alone. Just a little light. So you can see that it's passing through. I don't want these trees to be too hard edged, and then it'll look too flat. Keep it soft. Keep the edges soft. Let these last couple little touches be my last touches, and that's it. Otherwise, you can end up tearing the picture apart. It's a lot better. So, I guess the next thing to do is just to take the tape off and do the unveiling. So I went back and I did a little bit of embellishments here with the water. Just added a little bit more of the waves. Put a little bit of the green next to where the islands were to make them pop out a little bit. So we did all of this without using white, and that's the key. I didn't do anything to accent it in white. There's sometimes some things that I might do with the use of white or some opaque color, but this one was not done by doing any of that. So here's the unveiling. I take off the blue tape. I always like to do the unveiling. So this is the paper that I use with arches. Arches paper. Takes to paint well. So I hope you like this lesson. I hope this was helpful for somebody. If it was, as they say, hit the like button. And please subscribe to my channel. Take care and have a good day.